Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Josh and you're watching Our History. Today we're going over the life of Dr. John Daniel Kestell, also known as Father Kestell, who was a minister in the Dutch Reformed Church, a Bible translator, writer and cultural leader. This is part 1 of the 2-part series, so if you enjoy this, please be sure to like, and if you're new here, consider smashing the subscribe button. If this isn't your first rodeo and you haven't shown some love to the subscribe, now is your opportunity. Thank you for watching. Dr. John Daniel Kestell, also known as Father Kestell, was a minister in the Dutch Reformed Church, a Bible translator, writer, and cultural leader. As a writer, he sometimes used pseudonyms Afrikanus Jr. and Leinad, the latter being his middle name spelled backwards. Early life and heritage. John Daniel Kestell was the fifth of 6 children. His parents were the Englishman Charles Kestell and the Afrikaner Dorothy Louisa Weyer, who were married on October 31st, 1845 by Reverend Daniel Lindley in Pietermaritzburg. On his father's side, he was a direct descendant of a British settler family that initially settled in the Albany district and later moved to Grahamstown. In 1845, John's father arrived in Natal on the ship Rosebud and settled in Pietermaritzburg, where he joined the Dutch Reformed Church as a devout believer and served as a deacon and elder. His mother died in 1858 when John was 4 years old. His father's second marriage took place on August 24th, 1859 to Johanna Susanne van den Berg. John began schooling with Miss Osborne of St. Andrew's Church and later attended the government school at the Voortrekker Church, where Reverend W. Nisbet was the principal. As a child, he met many Voortrekkers, including Sarel Cillier, J. N. Boshoff, Erasmus Smith, Daniel Bezuidenhout, and Martinus Oosthuizen. On March 31st, 1869, his father took him out of the government school and enrolled him in Mr. Muirhead's school, where he received his first lessons in Greek. He left school in 1870 and began working for Pietermaritzburg on October 6, 1870. During this time, diamonds were discovered in Griqualand West, and on May 17, 1871, he and his father left for the diamond claims at New Rush, where they earned enough to survive and save a little. They sold the claim a year and a half later and returned to Pietermaritzburg in January 1873. Kestell continued his studies at Stellenbosch Gymnasium from March 1873 and lodged with Miss Fora in the town. He completed his matriculation in 1875. During this time, H.F. Schoen and Abraham Creel were among his classmates. Education and study. In 1874, he converted to Christianity and recorded in his diary on February 6, 1874, that he had decided to become a minister. After school, he enrolled in the Theological Seminary in Stellenbosch, where Professors N. J. Hofmeyer and John Murray were lecturers. Meanwhile, his father suffered significant financial setbacks due to transport ventures to places like Durban, Pretoria, Middelburg, Transvaal and Bloemfontein. In 1876, he brought oxen on credit to transport a load to Middelburg, but en route, lightning killed most of the oxen. After this, he had to inform John that he could no longer support him financially. Reverend Abraham van Velden collected £40 from his congregation to help Kestell and helped him secure a loan for further expenses, and also ensured his life so that he could continue his studies. During his studies in Stellenbosch, John could not afford to go home, so he spent holidays with friends. He was only able to return home for the first time in over 5 years in September 1878, after his father had saved enough money to make it possible. He stayed for a month before returning to Stellenbosch. On December 15, 1877, he became engaged to Getreide Anna or Treide Hofmeyer, daughter of Professor N. J. Hofmeyer. Brief, 1881. In September 1880, Kestell went overseas to Utrecht in the Netherlands to continue his theological studies and studied under Professor Nicolaas Beerts. He also took private lessons in French, progressing so well that he became fluent in the language, which, together with his thorough knowledge of Greek and Hebrew, made him proficient in 5 languages. In December 1880, he visited England to find a publisher for his drama, The Struggle for Freedom, and from London he also visited Paris. In January 1881 he returned to Utrecht to continue his studies, but from the end of March 1881 he embarked on an extensive tour of Europe, visiting Belgium, Germany, Italy and Switzerland, among other countries. He was back in Utrecht on March the 21st of 1881. He completed his studies and left for England on May the 29th, 1881, where he stayed for almost a month before embarking on the return journey to South Africa. In August 1881, he returned to South Africa and completed his studies at the Theological Seminary. He was ordained as a minister in the Dutch Reformed Church in October 1881. J.D. Kestell's entry into ministry. Immediately after his ordination, he received a call to the Dutch Reformed Church congregation of Lindley in the Free State, which he declined. In 1881, he was appointed assistant minister in the Dutch Reformed congregation of Du Toitspan on the Kimberley Diamond Fields. On February the 28th, 1882, he married Trader Hofmeyer, the second youngest child and only daughter of Professor Nicolaas Hofmeyer, whose biography Reverend Kestell later wrote. Through his marriage he gained 3 ministers as brothers-in-law, the eldest 2 of whom were deposed but later reinstated in their offices, Reverend Adrian Jacobs Lou Hofmeyer, Jan Hendrik Hofmeyer. Also the first editor of the Dutch newspaper Ons Land, and Nicolaas Hofmeyer. His 4th brother-in-law was Charles Louis Hofmeyer, a lawyer and school inspector in the Cape Colony. 5 children were born from their marriage, 2 sons and 3 daughters. He was confirmed as the pastor of the neighboring Dutch Reformed congregation in Kimberley on March the 25th of 1882. The plight of the children and women on the diamond fields deeply moved him and his wife, leading them to establish the Newton Home to provide assistance. Afterward, he was called to the Dutch Reformed congregation of Harrismith in 1893 and was confirmed there on January the 12th, 1894. During this time, he regularly contributed, including short stories, to the Gereformeerd Maandblad and Ons Tijdschrift. Second War of Independence. During the Second War of Independence, Reverend Kestell served as chaplain and field minister of the Harrismith Commando from October 1899 and met de Boeren commandos. His wife and children spent the war with her family in Pietermaritzburg, as the British had forbidden them from living in the Harrismith parsonage. His 15-year-old son, Charles, accompanied his father to the battlefields. During the Battle of Platrand near Ladysmith on January 6, 1900, Reverend Kestell risked his own life to tend to the wounds of the injured on both sides and quenched their thirst. At the request of the British, a memorial stone was later erected for him at this hill. He became a friend and advisor to President M.T. Steyn and General Christian de Wet, and the 3 soon became known as the Triumvirate of the Free State: the statesman, the soldier, and the spiritual leader. Along with his commando, Reverend Kestell moved to Nieuwpoort, and from there across and along the Free State's plains as they evaded the British. They met Steyn and de Wet on November 14, 1900 at Koranasberg. On June 6, 1901, the British captured him at Graspan near Reitz and held him in a kraal on the farm with other Boers. However, that same afternoon, after a fierce battle, they were freed by a group of Boers. His son Charles was captured in October 1901 and died in Pietermaritzburg on January 8, 1902 as a prisoner of war, making him one of the 3 Boer chaplains to lose a son during the war. During the last year of the war, Reverend Kestell accompanied General de Wet as a private secretary to Europe as members of the Boer deputation. There, they attempted to persuade the governments of Europe to recognize the republics as independent states, a task in which they were unsuccessful. They left for Europe on February 13, 1902, and returned to South Africa after the Peace of Vereniging was signed in June 1902. Visit to Europe. In August 1902, Reverend Kestell, along with the Generals de Wet, Koos Delaray, and Louis Botha, travelled to Europe to raise funds for the suffering Boers. On this trip, he served as de Wet's secretary and assisted the general with proofreading and editing his book of war memories, De Stryd tussen Boer en Brit, the struggle between the Boer and Brit. He accomplished this within 3 months, while also working on his own war memoirs and preparing the manuscript of his brother-in-law Nico Hofmeyer, 6 maanden by die Commandos, 6 months with the Commandos, for publication. Ministry in Vicksburg. In February 1903, Reverend Kestell was called to the Dutch Reformed congregation of Vicksburg. His confirmation was set for March 7, 1903, and his first meeting was held on March 9th of that year. Just a few months after his confirmation, Reverend Kestell advocated for the construction of a new church in Vicksburg. At the congregational meeting on July 25, 1903, it was decided that a monument in memory of the congregation's fallen members would take the form of a new church. This elegant house of God, for which Reverend Kestell was co-architect, was consecrated on April 12, 1907. The decision to build a church was ratified by the congregational meeting, and a building committee was elected. If you made it this far, I hope you're really enjoying this channel. And if you'd like to support the creation of more content like this, because all contributions are greatly appreciated, consider joining the channel in the membership tab or check out the Patreon link in the description below.